And many thanks to all our friends on the 5. This is a Fox News Alert. Welcome to Hannity. Tonight, President Trump, he sets the record straight about the violence in Charlottesville. It was an epic beatdown of the liberal mainstream establishment media. They are now in full, complete panic meltdown mode. And unlike President Obama, the president said today he'll actually wait for facts to come out instead of rushing to judgment when things like this happen. That is tonight's very important breaking news. Calm opening monologue. And tonight, once again, we have to give you news and information you will not get from the Destroy Trump establishment media. Now, despite President Trump repeatedly condemning the horrific, inexcusable acts of violence and, of course, white supremacy again and again, all that took place in Charlottesville this weekend, Democrats, the Destroy Trump media, continue to viciously attack the commander-in-chief and falsely, again, accusing him of being racist and being bigoted. And just like they accuse Republicans, right? We've chronicled this how many years? Every 2 to 4 years, they do that during elections. Well, earlier today, the president fought back. He did it in a big way. He let the media have it during a press event at Trump Tower, where he once again condemned these white supremacist groups. Watch this.
I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
He also repeatedly called out the fake news media. Watch this.
If the press were not fake, and if it was honest, the press would have said what I said was very nice. But unlike you and unlike the media, before I make a statement, I like to know the facts. That was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute, I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news.
I'm not finished, fake news. The mainstream media, once again, hysterical. Complete meltdown mode today because President Trump told some truths. Yes, there are a lot of truths here. White supremacist groups, they are disgusting. They are despicable. All people of goodwill and conscience agree. But there was both sides causing violence. Want to believe it? Take a look. This is out of control violence. It is complete mayhem. The people that provoked this, yeah, I'll agree. They were the white supremacists. They are the ones that are most responsible. And you know what? Let me say this about some of the protesters. They came out for all the right reasons. This brings out a morally justifiable anger in people that are that ignorant. But it does not give these all-left protesters, doesn't give people of good conscience even, the right to attack them, punch them, hit them, etc. We completely disagree with everything these white supremacist groups stand for, believe in. They're not conservatives. They're not Republicans. We don't know these people, small percentage of the population. But under the First Amendment in this country, they have a right to say hateful, awful, and even racist things, whether we like it or not. Now, the ACLU tonight, one of the biggest Trump-hating groups, even defended these white supremacists and their right to hold the rally. Now, this group even put out a statement. They said, quote, "The First Amendment is a critical part of our democracy. It protects even vile, hateful, and ignorant speech. And for this reason, the ACLU of Virginia defended the white supremacists' right to march, but we will not be silent in the face of white supremacy. Those who stand silent enable it, including the president." And the ACLU also tweeted, "Not sure," pay attention, because they're repeating what the president said, "not sure who provoked first. Both sides were hitting each other at Justice Park before the police arrived." They also added, "The guy on the ground is a Unite the Right protester. Those in black and red are Antifa protesters." And where are the police, by the way? Is anyone asking that question tonight? Why didn't the Democratic Governor Terry McAuliffe, the Democratic mayor of this city, why did they not order the police to stop the violence sooner? And if the police were outgunned, like Terry McAuliffe said, why did he not request the National Guard be called in? And there's the fact, the Destroy Trump media, they will never, ever be satisfied with how many times the president condemns racism, violence, white supremacy, bigotry, the likes of which we saw this weekend in Charlottesville. How many times does this president have to say it? Let's take a look at President Trump's original comments on this before the white supremacist madman plowed into people with his car. Here's what the president tweeted soon after, quote, "We all must be united and condemn all that hate stands for. There's no place for this kind of violence in America. Let's come together as one." And the president went on to say, "We must remember this truth. No matter of our color, creed, religion, or political party, we are all Americans first." And last night, if you remember on the program, I showed how many times over the years that the president condemned white supremacy, condemned the Klan, condemned David Duke. The media never points that out. And after the protest turned deadly, President Trump, he immediately came out and immediately condemned what was going on. Watch this.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides.
Strongest possible terms, and the ACLU says there were two sides here. Now, all weekend long, the media in this country, they were unhinged, pretending like they didn't know what the president was even talking about. They ran wild with a narrative that he didn't mention the groups by name, so somehow that makes him sympathetic to these white supremacists. So President Trump, once again, he came out yesterday. He condemned what happened. He called out these groups by name. They don't pay attention to this part. Watch.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
Hate groups repugnant to everything we hold dear. But of course, that's not good enough for the media and the left wing in this country. Now, a quick sidebar. Where was the media? What was it, 6 weeks ago? A Bernie Sanders supporter, one of his supporters targeting Republicans at a baseball practice, leaving Congressman Steve Scalise, the third-ranking Republican in the House of Representatives, fighting for his life. The gunman had an assassination of Republicans list. Where was the media blaming the Democrats the same way they're now blaming Trump? But back to the topic at hand. So once again, after condemning these groups, President Trump had to explain to the press exactly why he didn't immediately jump to conclusions like, for example, President Obama did again and again when things happen. Take a look at this.
Here's the thing. When I make a statement, I like to be correct. I want the facts. This event just happened. In fact, a lot of the event didn't even happen yet as we were speaking. This event just happened. Before I make a statement, I need the facts. So I don't want to rush into a statement. So making the statement when I made it was excellent.
Now, President Trump, really, when you think about it, he's right, and we need to learn from the mistakes of Barack Obama. Nobody, especially the President of the United States, should ever rush to judgment and make a situation work. President Obama did it numerous times in these high-profile racial cases while he was president, and he rushed to conclusions before facts came out. Take a look.
The Cambridge police acted stupidly. There is a long history in this country of African Americans and Latinos being stopped by law enforcement disproportionately. That's just a fact.
When Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son.
And we have to close the justice gap. How justice is applied, but also how it is perceived, how it is experienced. That's what we saw in Ferguson this summer when Michael Brown was killed and the community was divided.
Now, President Obama rushed to judgment in 4 high-profile cases. He got the facts wrong in the end, and guess what? It led to false narratives being created, lies being spread, like Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot, and that myth. I've covered these issues in detail. Then there's the issue of the leftists destroying public property, tearing down monuments like we saw happening yesterday in Durham in North Carolina. Now, you can disagree with these statements. You may not like these monuments. By the way, you can fight politically. You can shout people down and say anything you want to say. But is there not the rule of law that needs to be applied here? In other words, you can go up so far with speech and say anything you want, but you can't punch. You can't beat, you can't tackle, you can't fight with people just because you hate what they're saying, even when what they say is disgusting. Interestingly, even the ACLU agrees with me and the president on that tonight. Now, the president also reacted to this issue. Take a look.
You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do.
Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue.
Joining us now, author of the New York Times bestseller, we're now, 11 weeks on the New York Times list, Understanding Trump, including #1, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. I want to go over truth here because, and as somebody that lived in Georgia and the South and Stone Mountain and what's happening to these monuments, I think you have a very, very unique perspective and also the historical perspective you have. But I want to first go over the president repeatedly now for days has condemned white supremacism, David Duke, the Klan, and all these groups. And I watched the media today, and they go insane because he says, you know what? There was violence on both sides. Not all, but there was. And the media went insane because he said it. What's your reaction?
Well, first of all, everybody who went insane is insane. The American Civil Liberties Union, in their Twitter feed, and I want to give Joe DeSantis credit for tracking this down and getting it to me, the ACLU in their Twitter feed said both sides came for violence. They said the video you're looking at, you see people on the left who are being violent, you see people on the right who are being violent. The truth is, President Trump is telling the American people the truth, and the elite media hates it, and the left hates it, and he's going right at the heart of the big lie on the left. Most of the violence we've seen politically this year has been on the left. They're not putting a $9,000 escape door into the chancellor of the University of California at Berkeley's office to hide from right-wingers. They're putting in there to hide from left-wing students. You know, the students at Middlebury College who blocked a conservative from speaking weren't on the right, they were on the left. So let's be really clear here what we're faced with in this country. And I think we should condemn neo-Nazis. They are an anti-Christian, totalitarian, anti-Semitic movement. We should be very tough on them. I think we should condemn racism. But frankly, I think we should condemn racism on both sides. And I think you have a very strong case here that there are people who've been out there advocating shooting cops. Those weren't right-wingers. So let's be really clear. There is more than enough blame on both the right and the left to say, we're tired of all of you. Cut it out or we're going to put you in jail.
Let me ask about the president saying, you know, he spoke out on Saturday. I read his tweets again. He spoke out on Monday. He spoke out today. He said it again and again and again, specifically naming them. And he said that he waited until he had facts. And I compared it to what Obama did. Obama rushed to judgment George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin, Ferguson, Missouri, the Cambridge Police, Freddie Gray, Baltimore. Was wrong on all counts because he didn't wait for evidence, testimony, facts to come in. Was it right for the president to condemn the hatred, what we saw on Saturday, wait for the facts, and do what he did on Monday and today?
Well, look, I have to confess, Callista and I saw live on Saturday his statement. We both thought it was pretty clear and direct. And remember, this is a man who, as a candidate, repudiated David Duke. As a candidate, repudiated the Ku Klux Klan.
Again and again.
You know, and by the way, this is a man who, in his inaugural address, says to the entire country, we all bleed the same color. You cannot be a patriotic American and be a racist. I mean, he's very clear in. So I think he's starting out Saturday thinking, I'm going to add to what I've already been saying. And I suspect he was shocked at the level of hostility, including among some Republicans, that you had to be very specific. So he comes back and he's very specific. I mean, how can you be more specific than this? But then he makes the mistake of telling the truth about violence on the left. And so all of a sudden the elite media has to go crazy again. I just think it's time to draw a line in the sand and say, Everybody in this country who wants to lead a big lie, watch the elite media, watch the left-wing Democrats, because they represent a big lie. It's worse than fake news. It is a big lie.
Let me, we both lived in Georgia, and we now have instances, and we have other cities, now Baltimore and all these other cities. You saw it in Durham, North Carolina yesterday, and it's like ripping down statues of our founders and our framers. The president talked today about, okay, yes, George Washington was a slave owner. Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. Are we now heading towards a point, and he said it's up to the states to decide, where we are now going to watch history being removed from city after city after city? Is that where we're headed? For example, in Stone Mountain, Georgia. I know you've been to Stone Mountain. There is a carving on Stone Mountain, and you have the president of the Confederacy up there, Jefferson Davis, and others. And is that going to be sandblasted next week?
I actually asked that question in an email a while ago to a friend of mine. Look, let's be clear. I think it's perfectly reasonable for an African American looking at somebody who fought to protect slavery to be deeply offended. Now, there's a huge difference between Washington and Jefferson and Jackson, who may have been slave owners, but they, in fact, were all moving towards a world that had less slavery, not a world that had more slavery. But there's no question people who were fighting to protect slavery, to protect slave trading. And let me also say for the audience, I was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I grew up in an integrated United States Army. I moved to Georgia as a junior in high school. So those people are going to say, well, he's a Georgian, so he's going to say these things. I'm saying him as a historian. I think if a city wants to take a statue out of the center of the city and put it in a museum, that makes some sense. I don't think we want to be like the Taliban, who were destroying Buddhist temples, or Buddhist statues. I don't think we want to be like ISIS, which was destroying historic monuments. And you have a great deal of people on the left who, if they could destroy our entire memory of America, they would wipe it out, and we'd have no knowledge of what it meant to be an American. And we need to draw some lines in the sand.
Stay right there. We'll have more with Speaker Gingrich right after the break. Also, Laura Ingraham tonight. She'll weigh in on the president and firing back earlier today and all the issues ahead. Straight ahead.
Hannity.
Jonathan Seri live in Homewood, Alabama. Throughout the state, election night watch parties are going on in the special primary to fill the U.S. Senate seat once held by Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Luther Strange, who was appointed to fill the vacant seat back in February, has been having a very good night, apparently bolstered by the endorsement of President Trump, also enjoying strong support from the Republican establishment. Now, throughout this campaign, Republican Mo Brooks had tried to capitalize on anti-establishment sentiment among voters, but it was another anti-establishment Republican, Roy Moore, who had a very strong showing this evening, resonating with voters. Analysts say he may have benefited from low voter turnout in this election because of his loyal and active following of religious conservatives who remember him as the Ten Commandments judge. The Associated Press is projecting Moore and Strange will face each other in a runoff in September.
In America, and do you think things have gotten worse or better since you took office?
I think they've gotten better or the same. Look, they've been frayed for a long time, and you can ask President Obama about that because he'd make speeches about it. But I believe that the fact that I brought in, it will be soon, millions of jobs. You see where companies are moving back into our country. I think that's going to have a tremendous positive impact on race relations. And I'll tell you, we're spending a lot of money on the inner cities. We're fixing the inner cities. We're doing far more than anybody's done with respect to the inner cities. It's a priority for me.
That was the president earlier today addressing this week's violence in Charlottesville and the overall state of race relations in the U.S. We continue more with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, I watch the media that is just so openly hostile to him that it doesn't seem to matter anymore what he's going to say or do. And you have made this point many times on this program. But there's a pretty profound point there. If you look at the Obama years, I've given the statistics many times, 50 million Americans in poverty, 50 million on food stamps, 13 million more on food stamps after Obama, 8 million more in poverty after Obama, lowest labor participation rate. We now have 1 million new jobs. And what I hear the president saying is we fix the economy. We create an opportunity society. If we build in job creation and create wealth in a prosperity society, it goes a long way. If every American has their shot at the American dream, does that help race relations in America?
Well, look, I think you ought to draw a distinction. I think that for the average African American, a better job, a safer neighborhood, a better school, greater opportunity to have a better future, I think that does help, and I think it helps bring us together as a people. On the other hand, there is an entire block of people now who want to use racism and left-wing ideology to deliberately, consciously split us. Now, many of these are in the elite media. They're doing it quite deliberately, and we have to have the guts to take them head on. And we have to point out that, you know, it was not President Trump's policies that led 4,000 people to get shot in Chicago last year. It wasn't President Trump's policies that have made Baltimore a nightmare in terms of people getting killed. What you've had is a decay in this country under left-wing policies that has led to dramatic depth of poverty, dramatic collapse of the law in some inner cities, and a sense of helplessness. I think Trump is the first real opportunity to begin to turn all of that around, starting by going after these renegade cities that refuse to get illegal criminals out of the city and refuse to cooperate with the federal government.
Let me, I'm not finished fake news, and the president calling out the media repeatedly today, when he said it, I just openly laughed out loud because they are so hostile towards him. And they, all the times that he said everything that he said about white supremacy and the people responsible for hatred this weekend, it has no impact on them. They actually were trying to make the case after he made the comments on fake news. Oh, he just repudiated everything that he's been saying all weekend. And I'm like, no, he didn't.
Right. Look, you made a point earlier that I really almost wanted to get into in the first segment, and that is the reason Obama was consistently wrong when he would get into these kind of problems is he took the view of the elite media, which is just wrong. The reason Trump is going to turn out to be right, and as I said, it's the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, which has said he's right. They didn't say he's right, but they said it is correct to say that the violence in Charlottesville was on both sides. Now, Trump, because he doesn't rely on the New York Times, the Washington Post, CBS News, Trump is actually looking at reality. He's getting real reports from the Department of Justice, and he's also using his head. I mean, he's using common sense. And I think it's important to recognize that the elite media is in a frenzy to undermine him and, if possible, drive him from office in what really is a news media coup against the people of the United States who have elected him president. He's supposed to get 4 years in office, even if CNN doesn't like it or MSNBC doesn't like it. But they're going to do everything they can to isolate him, drive him down, and try to destroy him.
All right, Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it. When we come back today, President Trump called the driver who plowed his car into a group of people, killing one woman, called him a murderer. Laura Ingraham next.
COPD for arthritis backed by the empty jar guarantee. Back pain? Try Australian Dream Back Pain Cream. Real medicine, trusted relief.
The driver of the car is a disgrace to himself, his family, and this country. And that is, you can call it terrorism, you can call it murder, you can call it whatever you want. I would just call it as the fastest one to come up with a good verdict. That's what I'd call it. Because there is a question. Is it murder? Is it terrorism? And then you get into legal semantics. The driver of the car is a murderer. And what he did was a horrible, horrible, inexcusable thing.
That was the president earlier today talking about the driver of the car that rammed into a group of protesters this past weekend in Charlottesville, killing one woman, injuring several others. Joining us now with Reaction Editor-in-Chief, LifeSet, Fox News contributor Laura Ingraham. Let's respond to everything that the president said today. Let's get your overall impression.
Well, it was an interesting day to come out. I mean, he clearly was torched by the media's coverage and reaction to his first statement and then his follow-up statement. From his performance today, it's clear that he believes he really can't ever get credit from the media. They're never going to say, you know, good job on that. I'm glad you said that. They're not going to say that to him. And I think he's genuinely really frustrated by that, Sean. And so I think it spilled over in some of the back and forth with reporters. I mean, for a lot of us, it was very entertaining because, of course, these reporters.
I'm not finished, fake news.
Yeah, I'm not done yet. But I'm always thinking the long term here. How does today advance the Trump agenda, whether it's infrastructure, which was the ostensible reason for that press conference, or tax reform or anything else. I'm not sure today advanced that interest, but it also did give Americans who are kind of tired of the hate and the extremism on both sides, I think it gave them a little bit of a breather, and to some extent saying, okay, he's at least saying now that everybody seems to be out of control, calm it down, let's move forward, call this what it is. This was murder or terrorism, whatever you want to call it. But it's unacceptable in today's society. I think he was unequivocal. I think he could have been that specific and that unequivocal as he was yesterday. On Saturday, it probably would have been better for him and better for the long term of this country. But there are some people out there, they're just never going to be satisfied with what he says. So he's not, no matter what he says in response to any crisis, they're going to ridicule him or satirize him or say he's dumb or say he doesn't really care or he's an egomaniac or, pick your poison.
No,
so he's not trying to satisfy them at this point.
They're actually saying, what their narrative was all weekend. Oh, the president must be racist. Oh, the president doesn't condemn white supremacists. I've now played a history of everything he said from the weekend about this incident, about white supremacy, about David Duke, et cetera, et cetera. He said it all. There is a simple truth here, that there were people on the other side that did take to violence over this weekend. Were they the instigators? No, I blame the white supremacists. They showed up. There's some people that maybe have not white supremacist views, that believe in heritage and history, et cetera, and have other motivations on the issue at hand. Yeah, I believe that's true, too. Were there good people that wanted to with righteous indignation go after white supremacists? Yeah, they're good people, and they're standing up for what's morally against what is morally reprehensible. But as you watch this video and you see this fighting, there's violence there on both sides.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's an interesting piece in the Daily Caller that was just published, I think, this afternoon. There's one of the people who was at that event from, I guess, that Unite the Right side. I don't even know what this group is, but and just went through very specifically how the police failed to let the crowd disperse. In other words, that group, the right-wing group or white supremacist group, I guess they weren't all white supremacists, but some of them were, a lot of them were trying to get out of there. But they were all shuttled into this one area of the park where the Antifa crowd was waiting for them with rocks and bats and all the other things that they were throwing.